Starfield has been out for a little while now. Elder Scrolls 6, that is coming in maybe half a decade if we're lucky, but something else is brewing. There is another game in the works. Over the past couple of days, a couple of key people at Bethesda have left. We've seen Pete Hines leave, head of PR over there. Is that a big loss? We'll talk about that, but he is gone. He is likely retired. But there's also Will Shen. He was a lead quest designer. He worked on Starfield. He was even one of the key people involved in Far Harbor. That was one of the Fallout 4 DLCs that was actually very well received in comparison to the rest of the game, and certainly on the story front. People felt the Fallout 4 story, some of the quests were a little bit lacking. I would agree with that. But Far Harbor, it felt like a bit of a return to form, and Starfield, of course, didn't really continue on that trajectory. People feel that Bethesda have sort of dropped off a little bit in quality. But Far Harbor, probably one of the last genuinely high-quality pieces of content that they've released. And Will Shen, the person behind that, he's gone. He has left, and he has moved to Something Wicked Games. And this studio is currently making and they call it themselves a AAA RPG, open world. It's going to be more a cult-like, rather than maybe the Tolkien fantasy of the Elder Scrolls. Probably a bit creepier, more of a unique style. I can even say that with Bethesda, Morrowind probably had a unique style, and they slowly moved away from that with Oblivion and Skyrim. So it is trying to be more unique. The game is called Weirdsong. And the spelling for that game, it is W-Y-R-D-S-O-N-G. So not like weird song, it's its own word. And everything about it points to it being more like a traditional Bethesda RPG than really anything else. Something that is interesting, the fact that it's Bethesda veterans. So this is people, we're talking people back from the Oblivion, Skyrim days onwards. And similar for the Obsidian veterans who are working at this studio. They worked on Fallout New Vegas and a lot afterwards. So it's people who worked on games when their studios were probably at their peak or pretty close to it. But there's a lot of fans of these games where they'll love what Bethesda does on the open world front, the environmental storytelling, but they'll find that the main stories, the quests sometimes in those games, they're not of super high quality. They're maybe not as good as other RPGs like older BioWare games, certainly older Obsidian games as well, which leads me to them because Fallout New Vegas, it's known as having a lot of high quality storylines, characters, quests, but no one really talks about the open world. That's not really its strong suit. So to see both design sets, I guess both strengths from different studio veterans come together could be interesting. Right now, I'm not actually mentioning anything that's sort of brand new because Weirdsong, that was announced about a year ago, but the reason I'm interested is because it seems like Bethesda are losing studio veterans who are moving over here. They're moving over to Something Weird Games. It's not just some indie studio that one or two people from Bethesda left to go and start, and there's so many of those sorts of studios out there where there's a handful of people, they release a trailer, no gameplay, you hear about it every now and again, maybe it comes out, maybe it doesn't. But this studio does seem to be something different. Again, they refer to the game they're making as a AAA RPG. And scouring LinkedIn, there's at least 35 people at the studio right now. It's growing. And so many of the people there used to work at Bethesda and have left in the last year and moved on. And this is happening over time. Again, Will Shen, who I mentioned, he only moved there a day or two ago, or at least he announced that. So this is reoccurring. This didn't all happen in one big swoop, one big hit. It seems to have started since the Microsoft acquisition. And you do have to wonder, are things rosy? Are they cozy at Bethesda? Because it doesn't seem to be the case. Obviously, Starfield, not super well received by everyone. There are some people who do really like it, some people who hate it, but most people probably do sit in the middle and think, yeah, it's an okay game in the grand scheme of things. It's got some okay storylines, but everything is lacking. Probably the best way I've seen it described is it doesn't really excel at anything. The characters are okay, the world is okay, the storylines, the exploration, it's all at best middling, and it's certainly not as good as prior titles, at least when you think about how good something like a Skyrim or some of the Fallouts were at what they tried to do best, the open world exploration. That was so much better in prior games. When Will Shen left, something he said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it was something like, AAA games are at their best and they are well developed when everyone comes together with one cohesive vision. And that got me wondering, that might have just been a generic quote, he was put on the spot and he just wanted to say something nice as he was sort of heading out where he's going, his future at this new studio. But it did make me wonder, was Starfield one cohesive vision? Or was it that people were pulling in different directions? There were some studio veterans there who wanted space exploration. Some of them were more focused on the story. Some of them were more focused on the planet exploration, actually exploring like you would in a Skyrim or a Fallout. Because it seems like they half-assed all of these different areas. And maybe people at the studio aren't having it, they're not enjoying this direction, and that's why they're starting to move off to develop Weirdsong, to develop a brand new game where they can focus on their strengths. Jeff Gardner, I've written down his name because he's the studio head of Something Wicked Games, he's the leader, and it's a bit funny, he was actually the head of Fallout 76, and that may have been why when Weirdsong was announced a year ago, people weren't super excited. However, he may have just been put in a tight spot with Fallout 76. Some people think overall the content's okay, but it was probably just the idea of developing an MMO light, essentially, that was no good. That may have been where the problem was, and that might have been out of Jeff's hands. Maybe he's an alright guy, he's an alright developer, and it seems like people are following him to this studio, so he must be doing something right, you would think. The game he's talked about making, he has mentioned in interviews that he doesn't want it to all be procedurally generated. He does want to have that mix. His idea of procedural generation is maybe you copy and paste some trees rather than hand placing every single one of them on a large map. And to me, that's reasonable. Where it goes too far is something like Starfield, where Todd Howard constantly talked about there's going to be thousands of planets, you can explore, you can do anything. But it's actually super limiting because when you go to the 50th planet, you start to think, hang on, I've already gone into this cave 20 times before. It's copy and pasted. I've already gone to this settlement 50 times. It gets repetitive because there's only so much procedural generation that's going to happen. And it also means you can't really find anything interesting because the game almost can't allow you to find anything exciting because not everyone's going to see it. It is random. So I like what Jeff is saying, that the procedural generation, use it to help you to maybe build out environments that are actually handcrafted, because that's really where Bethesda's strength was, the open world storytelling. Hand-placed, interesting landmarks, interesting text, notes that you pick up, actual environmental storytelling that tells you, shapes something, paints a picture. That's what we want to see more of. Starfield barely had it, but it seems like that's a focus for Weirdsong, and people are coming to this studio to work together on what's worked for them before. Bethesda Game Studios, it's not like, say, Blizzard's studios, where Diablo 4, I think, was made by 1,000 people, and similar for some of their other games. Plenty of these big AAA studios nearing 4 figures in the amounts of people working on them. For Bethesda, they've always talked about having closer, tighter-knit teams. Fallout 4, I believe it was developed by about 100 people, So 100 working on this big game. That's a really small number when you think of other AAA games out there. And if they liked that small team, they must trust each other. They may feel they've got the right group to get the job done. But it's those people who seem to be leaving. If that small number of 100, 30 people have left potentially to go to Something Wicked Games, that is a massive amount of people, and I don't know that for sure. It's possible that some of these people came from some of the other Bethesda studios. I mentioned the Fallout 76 team. I'm sure it wasn't all the Fallout 4 team or the Starfield team, which may have grown since then to be beyond 100 people. I'm sure it has. Even still, it's a fairly large number, I would say, and these are key people. Will Shen, again, he's not just a random programmer who worked at Bethesda. He was a crucial cog in that team. You could say the quests in Starfield not great, maybe there's not a big loss there, but Will Shenny, he spoke about that design actually coming together to build something that has a cohesive vision, and maybe he wasn't super happy. Clearly a number of people weren't happy, and we don't know yet, is it because of the Microsoft acquisition? Microsoft always talk about being hands-off, nothing's going to change, but people may have seen the writing on the wall. They may have worried that Bethesda were just going to start releasing Game Pass fodder, essentially. I mean, Redfall, if there's ever a game that feels like that, that is it. Even though that's a coincidence, the game is already a train wreck, but you sort of worry that the Redfall-style games are what we're going to get. Maybe people went, nah, I want to get out, I want to get away from Microsoft, start again, brand new studio. But the fact that this new studio has so many Bethesda veterans, it does make me think that there is something going on, something is rotten at Bethesda Games. So it will be interesting to see what happens. Wordsong, it started development in 2022, so I'm sure it's a fair while away. They're building up. It's going to be that development cycle, but it should still probably come out before the Elder Scrolls 6 if everything goes well. So it'll be very interesting to see if this game is good, if it has that Bethesda style. It's going to be one to follow, I imagine, and it's probably going to put some pressure on Todd, because Starfield, people are really skeptical of Bethesda right now. We've had an absolute dud, at least at release, with Fallout 76. If it's improved, fine, but I don't think many people are going to revisit it. That reputation has been tarnished. Starfield hasn't really repaired things. It's an alright game, but no one really sees Bethesda as that classic RPG studio who released Skyrim. Sure, there's going to be a lot of normies who probably don't even know that Starfield and Elder Scrolls are the same studio, despite all the advertising trying to paint Starfield as the next big Skyrim-like game. Despite all that, there are certainly going to be people who, no question, will go out and buy the Elder Scrolls 6. It will be a big success, pretty much regardless of the quality, but it's going to be almost their last chance, I think. If something like Weirdsong comes out, if we get other games by studios like Larian in the meantime, high-quality RPGs, it's going to continue to put pressure on Bethesda, and they'll know that they'll need to deliver if they're going to remain a juggernaut in the RPG space. So I like to see games like Weirdsong. I hope they can keep building, keep bringing in good personnel who've got experience in the genre, the RPG genre, and can make it the best it can be, because it sounds interesting. Hopefully we start to see a bit more of it, whether it's actual concept art, gameplay, probably wishful thinking, that could be years down the track, but I just hope that they get the right support. If they get a publisher, someone who leaves them alone so that they can stick to their strengths, and it is going to be one to follow. So thanks so much for listening. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Bye.